Is it still that same link, or did we need to send
It's
out?
probably going to give me a new link. I got to research and see if there's a way to do a permalink.
Got it.
All right, I can see the chat. I'm going to start typing.
The new chat?
The YouTube chat. I've opened the link and I've muted the YouTube stream.
No, I mean the new chat though. You have the new link already?
Yeah, sorry. To be specific, I mean the chat that's in the YouTube presentation. So
Right, but I'm saying, is it the old YouTube link or is it the new one that he just started?
okay, I ignored that and I just went to the Zoom thing and there's a YouTube button up the top left and I was able to use a drop down to open it there. So I guess it's the proper one because people are talking to me.
Oh, okay, okay. I just want to make sure.
Yeah. We're all doing this for the first time, so it's good to ask questions because I might have done the wrong thing. So
Oh no, see, there's a new link. Okay, that's what I was waiting for. Got it. Excellent. Hey everyone. It's Saturday. Yes.
All right, I think we've got everything going. We got our echoes under control.
Yeah. All right. Hello.
All right.
thanks, Lev.
Okay, we got our quad view is up on YouTube. So everybody on YouTube, we've got maybe a 20-second delay from where we are, so it'll be a little odd here and there, but we'll work through it. So hi everybody, Michael, Chris, Ice Locust. So Jeroen. So my name's Jim Coker. I'm the creator of this little gadget over here called the Vector Sequencer. And today we're gonna kind of start with presets and playlists and scenes as our introductory topic, and kind of diverge from there. In particular, we want to talk about drum fills a bit, both programmed fills and ad hoc fills. With me today, I guess it's top right on the screen, is Steve Turner from Melbourne, Australia. And lower left, we have Cody Murray from here in Albuquerque. And over on the lower right, we have Shonda Nunes, otherwise known as Trovarsi from Los Angeles. And she's going to be showing us some of the stuff she's doing with the vector. It's pretty cool. And so let's dive right in.
Nice.
So I'm going to start with a pretty simple example on the using presets and playlists on the vector. And the idea is just to give you a basic idea how they work together and how you can use them to build compositions. So I'm going to start with a simple pattern here, just 3 notes and a little bit of a delay on there. And I want to develop some variations on this pattern and link them together. So to go over here on the preset page, I can see I've got just one preset. I can make a new preset by holding down the Shift key and hitting the preset button again to duplicate the one I have now. And I want to turn on a couple more notes, so now I have a simple variation. I go back to the preset page and I can flip between these two. And you'll note when I cue it up, it'll blink for a bit and then it will switch on the bar. And that setting is for reference on the 3rd sequence control page, and it's called PQNT. It's normally set to bar. So I've got 2 variations here. And what I want to do is set up a simple playlist so that it flips between those every couple bars. And to do that,
Can you go to maybe the other view so you're the main, just so we have a bigger view of you while you're doing the walkthrough? Is that okay? Or
you mean the shot of me or the shot of the
yeah,
sequencer?
like do like the speaker view, so or yeah, just so you're the highlight.
Can't quite do that. It's not the right camera angle.
Got it.
I have
Okay.
to stand up to do the demo. But
Got it.
I'll be back in a minute.
Sorry.
No worries. So I got the 2 presets. I'm going to go to globals, and there's a setting on the first page of globals for the playlist. And I'm going to turn that on. There's a little icon for it with the arrow going left and a reverse arrow, which are the two main operations in the playlist. And then on all the edit pages, you'll see the same icon, so you can quickly tell if the playlist is running or not.
Hey, Jim,
Uh,
sorry
yeah.
let's, before we sort of go in earnest, I think what Shanda meant is the view you've got of the vector, that lovely top-down view, could you sort of make that the maximized screen? Because right now, everyone can see-
okay. Yeah.
is that- I think that's what's what we meant.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe I didn't say it.
So if you make that the pinned view, look, welcome everyone. Sorry, we're just going to sort this out. This is the first time we've done this as a YouTube stream. Bear with us, and we'll be back to the important messaging very soon.
Nice.
That's it.
All right, so that'll show up on the YouTube stream shortly. Okay, so we have the playlist on. And from the preset page, I'm going to hit the previous button. And this takes me to the preset edit page. And this is where I can rename the presets. I use encoder 1 to dial through the different preset names. And I can edit them here. I'm going to leave them alone for now. On the right-hand side, we got the settings for the playlist. And normally the setting is just for the preset to play forever. In this case, I'm going to say I want it to play for 2 bars. I could also set beats, but we'll go for bars. And then when that's done, I'm going to say I want to go to preset AO2. And then, so this is basically 2 instructions for this preset, and it's stored with the preset. Play for 2 bars, and then do something else. For preset 2, I'm going to do something similar. I'm going to say play for 2 bars, then go to preset 1. And if it's moving backwards, it assumes it's some sort of loop, and then I get a repeat option. So I can set the number of repeats. So I'm going to set this for infinite in this case. And now go back to the preset page and play the transport and watch them bounce back and forth.
Brilliant.
So it'll blink when the new preset's getting queued, and you can see there are little icons for the playlist actions on each preset. Okay, so I'm going to make a couple more variations, and I'm going to do something a little different. Instead of just doing Shift preset to duplicate, I'm actually going to do a copy. So to do that, I hold down the Edit button, which is E flat on the mini keyboard. It's just between encoders 2 and 3. Hold that down and press Select, and because this is a combination that's easy to forget, there's a little reminder on the top of the first OLED. So hold down Edit, press Select to copy this first preset, and now I'm going to push white key under encoder 5 to jump to this preset, which is where I'm going to paste it, and then I hold Edit again and press Skip, as it says on the OLED, to paste it in place.
So just to add in there, when you're doing the copy with Edit and Select, and then you selected A05 there, firstly that creates an empty preset, and then once you do the paste, it populates it with what you've just pasted. And it's worth noting that because if you're doing a live performance, you'll initially create a blank preset before you do the paste. Sorry, Jim, I just wanted to...
Nope, that's good to fill in. Now I'm going to, before I get confused, because now I have 2 copies of AO1, I'm going to go ahead and rename this new preset. So I hit the previous button again, and you can see preset 1 is AO1, and then also if I dial down to the 5th preset, it's still named AO1. So I'm going to rename it as AO5. And then I'm going to make a simple change by adding, by adding some extra gates on these notes. Transpose that 1C. Okay, I caught myself on the playlist. Make sure I'm switched into preset 5 for editing that. I'm also going to turn off the playlist for a second. Okay, so there's one variation. On preset 5, I'm going to shift preset to create a new one. And I'm just going to shift it up an octave. I'm going to make another variation. That's now preset 7. I'm going to skip a few steps. and then make one more variation. Okay, so now I have all these 4 variations here, and I can flip through them manually on the preset page. Or I can set up playlist actions. So I'm going to go to preset A05. And it actually copied the playlist actions from before. That's what tripped me up. I'm going to say I want to play this 1 bar. Go to A06. Preset 6. Play for 1 bar. Go to 7. Preset 7. Play for 1 bar. Going to go to preset 8. Preset 8. I do have 8 presets. Play for 1 bar, and then go back to preset 5, and then repeat forever. Go back and turn the playlist back on. Starting on preset 5, start the transport.
So essentially, you've programmed, effectively a song at this point, or enough changes that the 6 parts that you have there could easily become a song. And that's a really nice feature.
Or another way to look at it is, these 4 patterns, which are 8 steps each, and now make essentially a 32-step pattern.
Mm-hmm.
And if I had programmed 16-step patterns, I would have had a 64-step pattern. So this is one way to easily create longer patterns without having to reformat the part. Okay, so the next step is I'm going to incorporate this into scenes, and the way I want to think about it is that the first 2 presets on the left are scene 1, and then this set of 4 presets are on the second set are scene 2, and all I need to do in the scene page is program just the initial presets. So I'll show how to do that. If you press the preset button again, it goes to scene. So pressing the blue preset button always flips between scene and preset. That's one of the reasons I put preset edit kind of off to the side with the previous button, is so when you're in a performance you can quickly move between those 2 without getting stuck on the 3rd page unless you really need to go there. Alright, so on the scene page you can see the 1 preset for all 8 parts. I'm only working with part 1 today, and I'm going to set which preset I want. I can also set it to mute, but I want to start on A01. Using Coder 9 to select the second scene and set that to preset 5, and then move back to the first scene. I can start the transport, and you can see the display will show you when it's flipping presets for you. It shows you both the new preset number and the little icon to indicate that there's a playlist action there. And then anytime I want, I can move encoder 9 to select the next scene, and then push encoder 9 to queue it up. And as soon as that first preset A05 plays and then finishes, it'll start doing its playlist actions. And then of course I can go back to the first scene. And then, so people have sometimes asked, how do the playlist actions interact with the scenes? And basically the playlist actions are, if the playlist is on, they're always going to execute while that preset is running, regardless of how it got there from the scene. So, I have second scene set to start with preset 5, A05, and then when it gets to A06, it's going to do whatever A06 wanted to do. If I started a new scene that started with A06, then set that as current and run that, it'll run through its pattern just like it would otherwise. So go to preset 7, preset 8, now back to 5, and then back to 6.
So it just initiates that pattern first and then continues with the remainder of the programmed parts of the playlist.
Yeah.
That's great.
Cool. So what questions have we got?
Yeah, we don't have a whole lot of questions in the chat yet. I think it's just getting warmed up.
Okay.
How's it looking out there for the audience? Does anybody have any questions or anything that you would like for Jim to go back to that he just covered?
So Michael Kohler made the observation that it's a great way to make longer patterns. Say if you've got your 16 or 32 or whatever length step patterns, you can easily create longer ones and also mix different variations into each other as well. So yeah, it's very useful. So thank you for
So
that.
Steve, you're next in demo land. Tell me, before you start playing, tell me how you decided to use, I think you're using some scenes in this new composition of yours, correct?
Yeah, so because we had this commitment, I dug in and I learned how to use the scenes as well as I could, and they're actually fantastic. It's something that I've been doing manually previously, just getting very busy with the mute and unmute buttons, and even sometimes just pulling out cables when I wanted things to stop. And absolutely using the scenes option with the LaunchPad integration is a great way of doing things, because it remembers which parts you have active and which parts you have muted, and it also remembers which preset you're playing for that part. So with a press of one LaunchPad button, I'm able to just make very dramatic changes, or subtle ones, to the composition piece that I'm working through. I do have something prepared which I'd love to run through and sort of show some people. And it's a mixture of some different drum approaches, ways of triggering things within the vector internally and externally, and also coordinating and orchestrating all of that together using the scenes function.
There are some in the chat, but
yeah, I started responding via text. But Steve, before we jump into yours, I think you maybe are going to address Chris Cardone's question about similar navigations using the LaunchPad.
Absolutely.
So that's going to be coming up. And then to answer Bruce McIntosh's question real quick, whenever you jump away from a playlist pattern and you go back to that pattern, you're basically going to initiate the playlist that's programmed into that pattern. So whatever follows that pattern first is going to continue to play the pre-programmed playlist. And where else? Let's see. And then if you don't set the loops to infinite, then those loops are going to play the determined amount of times. And then I guess maybe the follow-up question to that is, does it go back to the beginning, or does it stop playing altogether once it reaches the end?
So what
it will
does...
It
Sorry,
goes
Jim,
to the
you
next
answer.
preset, doesn't it?
Yeah, it goes to the next preset. So if you say play 2 or 3 times, when it's done, say between presets 1 and 2, it'll start playing preset 3. So you can use that to chain presets, you know, throughout the entire piece if you want. And then someone else asked if you can automate scene playing. We can't do that yet. That's something I've held off on because I want to make sure we got the workflow between presets and playlists and manually triggered scenes correctly. In Steve's set, he's going to use the LaunchPad to flip between scenes. So, you know, I think Steve, right before you start, just give a quick overview of that one page on the LaunchPad and what's on there.
I have a question too, actually, before we go into just in general. Like, is there a way to change? So when you start and stop the sequencer, it goes immediately back. Well, on mine, and maybe it's just a setting, but it jumps immediately back to the first scene. Is there a way to, if you want to start and stop, let it just continue on whatever scene you're on? Or
that's a preference I want to get in right after 2.0 is basically a reset on stop. And then there was also a bug where if you hit stop, it would go back to scene 1, but it would overwrite the presets with whichever ones were current. And I've got that sorted out. I think that's a firmware release that I haven't put out yet, so that'll be out, I guess, on Monday.
Great.
Yeah, but sometimes, particularly when you're working on a set, right, you want to be able to, you know, okay, I'm in scene 8, and I need to stop and restart it several times to make sure I've got some other things right.
Cool.
And then, and just one of the things about, you know, using the playlist stuff is this is a way, if you want to have a very specific programmed drum fill and you're doing drum patterns, this is one way to do it. So if you have, let's say presets 1 and 2 were drum parts, and I wanted to play preset 1 for 3 bars and then preset 2 for 1 bars. It's pretty easy to set that up. So play for 3 bars, go to AO2, play for 1 bar, go to AO1, and then repeat. So that's one of several different ways, and this is kind of a side topic we'll talk about throughout the day, is what are the different ways that you can do fills on the vector. And this is probably the most dialed in one. You have a specific pattern and you want it to come up every 4th bar. And then Steve's going to show some things in his example where it's much more of an ad hoc thing, right? You can bring it in as you're playing as a performance option. So, Steve? Yeah.
Look, thanks very much. Anyone who's watched these things before is going to know I talk a lot. So, guys, just if you can moderate the questions and ping me, please, and aggressively interrupt when you need to, because I won't notice otherwise. One of those things. I'm always on 10. Okay, so I am going to go through an example of a patch that I kind of put together in about 4 hours, 5 hours maybe yesterday of mucking around. It's actually using some ideas from the last song I recorded. I wanted to kind of do an alternate version, and it was an easy way to pull together a bit of a demo here. Now, Jim's asked me to just run through the first page of the LaunchPad, which I'll do pretty quickly. I'm using a LaunchPad X here, and anyone out there who's thinking of getting a LaunchPad, just get one of the current production models, so a Mini Mark III or a LaunchPad X or a Pro, and make sure you go to the Novation control software and update the firmware on your LaunchPad before you do anything, because otherwise you'll have a bad time. Anyway, top row indicates the 8 parts on my vector. The next row indicates the record status of each part. So whether I'm using an external keyboard or my LaunchPad to trigger notes, etc. That's not part of the demo today. The third row here is my muted and active parts. Green is for active, red is for mute. The 4th and 5th rows show the individual voices per chord or drum part. So that would be part 5, part 6, part 7, which are active as a drum part 1, and part 8, which is active as drum part 2. And I can mute individual voices within a drum part. So I could mute the kick, bring it back in. I like kicks though, so I would never mute it, of course. That would be horrible. Joke. And then the next 2 rows are scenes. Now you can see I've got 9 of the pads lit up within those 2 rows, 6 and 7. The amberish one is the active scene, and all of these other ones have data populated in them on the screen that's on my vector, if you can see it. And that's the screen that Jim was running through before. So whilst I'm running through this demonstration, I'll be pretty much doing nothing on the LaunchPad except hitting that row of buttons there. And it'll show you just how powerful it is using the LaunchPad as a controller for your scenes. The bottom row is a dashboard view on the vector, and I'm not going to be touching that at all today because we did a bit on that last time. Happy to answer questions about it if anyone's got anything specific. So without further ado, I'm going to just run through this. It's not a fully realized piece of music. However, I hope that it points to you ways that you could create a fully realized piece of music and orchestrate it using the LaunchPad. So another great thing on this particular version of the firmware, which I believe is 1.9.37. Let me get my screen back again. Yep, 1.9.37. Is that I can actually start everything running by pushing the whatever it is button up here. Okay, what I'm going to do is run through each scene, and then I'm going to stop, and I'm going to pull apart some of the things I think I've done here that are a little bit interesting. Okay, that's a basic drum beat, obviously. So that was just
very nice.
through the scenes there. Thank you. Yeah, there's a little bit going on there. So I'm going to pull some of it apart in a bit of detail. I just want to highlight some of the basic mechanics. I'm on my scene 2 here, which you can see over on my screen. If I go to it, scene 2 has the following enabled. And sorry, I'm on scene 1. Yep, scene 1. If I go to scene 2, I want you to just watch that row of red and green up here. It automatically, when I'm changing my scenes, it's automatically muting and unmuting the parts. And also what it's doing, so if I go to, all right, sorry, my iPad's slipping occasionally because it's right in front of me. All right, let's do that again. So if I'm over here and I go to my preset, you can see that my preset selection over here looks like this. But if I go to here, my preset selection is different, right? So it's memorizing the part status being active or muted, and it's memorizing the preset that I've chosen per part within the scene, which makes life really easy when you want to just bring in and pull out parts like I just did then. So the first thing I did was bring in a nice drum beat, and that's just a single drum part on the vector routed to my assimilator and some nice little samples. Okay, next thing I did is this. Now what that is it's a trigger from a part in the vector that I've got connected to my morphogene, and I've imported a couple of splices into a reel, and my vector is actually telling the morphogene via the voltage control velocity. So if I go to select this part, so you can see on the screen here, I've got various velocities coming out of the vector into my morphogene. Someone's typing, Cody. Basically what you've got there is the voltages telling the morphogene to increment the sample upon the, so the vector's telling the morphogene to move the samples basically, which I thought was pretty neat. I could have done a lot more modulation too with sliding or whatever else the morphogene can do as well. But that's just using a velocity out for that particular function. Okay, so the next thing after that we did was I brought in a second drum part, and basically what that is more samples from my assimilator to add in that extra layer. But the other interesting thing, well, I believe it's interesting, that I did is one of the triggers going out from the second drum part is split between an assimilator sample via a branches clone, which is my Twigs by Michigan Synthworks, and it's sending a coin toss of triggers to the assimilator or to a rings. And I'm just going to modulate that by hand now and show you what that sounds like. So by using the coin toss lever on the Twigs, fader, sorry, I can basically get those triggers tending more towards the rings or more towards the sample. And it's just a really fun way of creating a bit of diversity within your beat. The other thing I did, which you might have seen me reaching across the screen, is I was from channel 3 of Maths modulating some things that happened within that layer. So I'll just show you what I'm talking about first. Okay. So what's happening there, if I go to the drum part, just wait for the piano sample to drive away. You'll have that in your head for a week. Okay, so if I go to modulation here, what I've done is from modulation 1, or it's called external 1 within the source, within the modulation matrix in the vector, is I've got modulation 1 or external 1 coming in, and my target is length. And I've got it set to the highest amount possible, being 100. I've also got external 1 controlling ratcheting with a very small amount. So what I'm going to do now is just mute everything except that single channel. Right. Now, hopefully you can still see my launch pad, and I'm going to go to that. Now, can you see that the blue sort of cursor per step is just going to 5 and then it's restarting? And that's because I've got my continuous controller. There it is. So that's 8 steps over and over again. Now, if I use that knob on the maths, right, so you can see what I'm doing there is basically modulating the length of the pattern, and also when I dial the knob to the far left, it's bringing in the ratchets.
That's great. Yeah, basically using the modulation input to turn up the value of the ratcheting inside the vector. That's awesome.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm doing there. So when I go further to the left, it's bringing in those ratchets, but if I dial it back a bit, I just get the length modulation. And also it's going through magneto too, so there's...
Also, Steve, your audio does kind of get loud and quiet. I don't know if there's a cable that you might be...
Is that my speaking audio or the music audio?
The speaking audio is consistent. The music audio is sometimes inconsistent.
Okay, I might have to look at that after, but thank you. Yeah, I think I know what that is.
Okay.
Okay, so that is in the modulation setting within the vector, and it's just a lot of fun to do that. It's a great way of bringing fills in, and also if you're using those triggers out to other modules that do interesting things, there's that as well. Now, the other thing that's that we brought into it too. So if I go to this scene, and I want to, okay, let's go to that. Play. Now you can see I've got a Euclidean circles running here. Now, even though that preset is managed by the vector, so what I'm doing there with that particular part is...
Steve, can you move your picture-in-picture? It's covering up most of the Euclidean circles.
Yes, I can. Just.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, scooch it over your expander, maybe. Oh, there you go.
Yeah, that works.
Yay. All right, sorry. Thank you. So really what I'm doing there is quite simple. That is my spectrum part over here. So let's unmute that one, and let's have a look at what's going on in the control pages there. You can see that the mode is T3. Now on the jack expander, triggers 1 to 6 can be used to bring in external signal. And in this case, I'm using the trigger input 3 to increment steps in the spectrum part. So what that means is I've got pitches programmed into the spectrum for the actual pitch of the notes, but it's completely decoupled from the gates within the vector. The steps are being played when the Euclidean circles tells the vector to play them. Now, let that sink in. What it means you can do is use something like a Euclidean circles or a Turing machine or a disting or your mutable instruments grids or anything that generates patterns or triggers like that to drive other melodies or rhythmic parts within your vector from those external sources. So I actually think it's a really cool thing to do because it gives you that hands-on control, but also knowing that the notes that it's going to play, you've already curated and you've already orchestrated within the vector as well. So there's a lot of fun to be had with that kind of stuff. And let me think, have I sort of covered everything there? Spectrum, piano, Euclidean...
You know, Steve, one thing I wanted to bring up, it came up in the chat, just for people that are watching later, is, go back to your modulation page, and, you have the same CV input mapped to 2 targets on that one part, and I think that's one of your drum parts. And
Yes,
then
exactly.
you can do that for all of the parts. So every part has 2 modulation buses basically, and they can listen to either or both of those mod inputs. So you could have all sorts of craziness triggered off of modulation just from an external CV, either a constant CV for mass you can control with a knob, or from an LFO, or even from another sequenced part on the vector. So you could have, you could literally run a cable from, say, a velocity output or a pitch output on the expander back into mod 1 and have all kinds of crazy stuff going on, and then when you want to mute it, you can just pull the cable. Or if you have Steve set up where you have something like maths that can generate a constant CV, you can easily just turn the knob up or down to control the amount of craziness.
Okay, yeah, that's exactly right. Or you can use like your mute module or whatever else. Is this audio better now? Have I finally worked it out?
It's still a bit low. Just turn the level up. That's good.
Oh, well, I'm sorry for that. But yeah, so hopefully those ideas came through, regardless of that. So. Yeah, and that's about it, unless anyone's got any questions there.
I think one thing for me, because this is one of the first pieces you've built up using scenes, is how did that help you compositionally in terms of building up the piece?
Yeah, so this is obviously something that isn't a fully musically realized thing, but basically my recording process is to go into Cubase, take all of that signal into individual tracks into my DAW, and then to do the modifications and effects and so on there. What I would normally do is do a couple of playthroughs using the basic or the fundamental parts of a track, record those as a single pass or a number of single passes into Cubase, pick one I like, and then start messing around with it. So given that I want to get a single pass that is, somewhat useful, the scenes give me a great way to manage those transitions so that I don't just hit a mute accidentally and completely ruin that single pass. As long as I just select my scenes appropriately, I'm going to get a good take, and it leaves my hands free to then muck around with filter modulation or whatever else I want to do, instead of having to just tap away on mutes and select presets and do all of that. So absolutely, from a composition point of view, it helps me put the ideas together, but then even more importantly, it helps me get that fundamental seed set of tracks, which are then going to become hopefully a finished piece of music. So yeah, that's how I use it.
Yeah, great. And I think to bring up something that came up earlier in the chat, you can have program change or MIDI note messages coming into the vector to trigger scenes. So that is actually a way to automate scenes, at least if you're working with a DAW or another sequencer that can generate program changes. And then it's a long-standing request, and pretty much number one on the list right now is to have the vector transmit program changes with preset changes. I know that's a very useful integration trick, so that's definitely in the pipe, and we'll be working on that soon. And then, and just to cover off, 2.0 is nearly finished. There's just a couple small things I want to look at. That'll be coming out soon. And we also have 2.0 versions of the manual. Let me get everybody back on screen here. There we are. So this is the 2.0 version, if I can get that angled right, and it includes several printed pages on using the LaunchPad. So very handy to have these around. Oops, wrong page. There we are. So
Very
anybody
cool.
that's interested in one of these, either PM or email me, and I'll see about getting one in the mail.
One of those.
Yeah, we'll get you one for sure. So, all right. So, Shonda, how's it going over there?
It's going good.
Yeah. So
Learning.
you've got a lot going on these days. You've got a class coming up, right? You're doing an online master class.
Yes, I'm doing a master class for Point Blank, and I will be showing various ways how to integrate a hybrid setup Eurorack into Ableton and to Perform. So I'm going to show two setups. I'm going to show like a beginner, like a basic setup, and then I'm going to show this crazy setup that I'm building right now. So I'll step over to that here. Just let's see if you guys can you hear me okay? I won't be able to see the chat too, so just kind of interject because I'm walked away from my screen just to let everyone know.
Sure.
Yeah, do you want me to walk through, or do you want me to just kind of play like just a, like?
Well, tell me a little bit about the setup, right? So you've got sequences coming out of the vector, and you got a lot of sounds in the modular, but you've also got Ableton running, right?
Yes. So what I'm doing is I am actually using the vector to sequence not only the DPO and the BIA, but I'm also sequencing two VSTs in Ableton with it as well. So I know people are like, oh, use the push, but I just love the way that you can make the different patterns, and it brings a little more continuity. I found to sequence it that way with the DPO and everything with the vector, and the fact that I can see, you can see your pitch and everything on the fly, and I like the more hands-on approach to playing. So yeah. So I think
it's a good way to have, you have those physical controls right away, but you can also bring in finished tracks and have those playing as well.
Yes. So basically, I have so everything's kind of crossing over. So I have like a kick in Ableton, but I also have the Jomox kick, which is being sequenced with a CV trigger. I'm using the ES9 as my interface. And then I have the other percussion from another drum track in Ableton. And then I have a drum track in Ableton, but all the audio is running out of the ES9 and either directly to an effect in the Eurorack. So for example, I have one drum rack running to the Mimia phone and then to the performance mixer, or it's running through the ES9 directly to the performance mixer, and then using the effects on the aux send and return channels. So.
And what's the thing to the left with all the knobs on it, just to the left of the performance mixer?
This right here. So this is something I'm trying. Some of you may or not know. Like I DJ occasionally, and I just wanted to try to bring the DJ element. Normally, when I play a set, I'm used to playing in a warehouse, and it tends to be like hour sets. And I guess the idea, what I'm trying to do with this setup is scratch both of those itches. Like be able to play with my modular and play this live set, but also I have a lot of tracks that I've released as well, and I want to be able to play those tracks and kind of bring those in and kind of mix back and forth. So I'm like I said, it's all in a work in progress right now. So I'm still doing some of the mapping and just trying to I'm still figuring out what's going to work in terms of, playability, because it's like, like crossing into a line, like what's manageable, like it does look a little crazy, but it is manageable. I think once I brought the push in, which that's like the other thing, is I'll probably just end up dumping the push and using some other deep MIDI mapping to maybe trigger some of the clips and not have to use a push at all. Just keep it down to this, and then, because the idea before is when I've played live and have used my laptop in the past, when I used to play with Forward, our main focus was to never show the laptop. So my goal ultimately is, when I finish this, is to be able to either shut the laptop or kind of set it off to the side and just play. So it's not like, this is like the main focus. But for today, since I'm building, here it is. So so I guess so here I'll just I'll play like just a couple minutes, and then I'll explain what each track is. Is that cool, or?
Sounds great. Sounds great. Take all the time you need.
Okay. Cool. Actually, let me unmute over here one second. And just let me know if the levels as I come in. So that's, can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was wonderful.
So thanks. Thank you. So yeah, I'm still kind of, so the idea was, so everything I started off with, I brought in the VST. Next, then I brought in the DPO on this channel, DPO through the filter. This little FSU control opens up the blend on the Dismosis Versio, which is what this VST is running through.
Nice.
And then let's see, then over here what I brought in last was the Bacillus, and I'm actually just using it as like, instead of the kick this time, I'm kind of using it as like a weird, like that higher pitch ping that was happening, and it's running through this delay here, and then through the dual effects Ericsson's. But so I guess as I was mixing, the last song, I guess, or track you heard was actually a track that I had released, and so that's what I'm trying to figure out here is how to, and that's what I'm working on basically, is mapping, doing various MIDI mappings, and I brought in a finished track, so I'm using the Overseer to kind of help make that shift and blend as I start to pull out the patterns, as how I would DJ, for example, meaning like some highs or lows, and then using that as a transition, and then I was in the last track, and that's all that was playing at the end. But yeah, I don't know.
Very nice.
What a cool rig.
Are there any questions? Or
so Chris Meyer is hanging around, and he had a question about how you're handling I guess both sync and latency compensation between Ableton and the live system.
Yeah. So what I did was I went into the preferences, and once I was able to dial back the output of the vector sequencer, it was just a little bit faster. So I pulled it back about 35 milliseconds. That's pretty normal. Like even when I've used like the Digitac and the Digatone, it was right around there. So, and that handled the sending clock, because I'm using Ableton as the lead, and Vector is following Ableton. So, and the other track delay, which I've kind of been playing with, is on the actual finished track, and I warped the tracks first of all, so to make sure that the tracks themselves are syncing with Ableton, depending on which BPM I want to play at. But I've noticed that I've had to push those tracks just 3 milliseconds forward using the track delay to kind of make up for that. And otherwise, everything else seems to be in order. I mean, I haven't had any other major issues. One thing I did I had the expander, and before I realized that I could actually just, I didn't necessarily need the expander to still program the drums. I'm using parts 7 and 8 to sequence the drums in Ableton. And I didn't have any onboard drums, but when I was using the expander to sequence an external like module, a drum module, I did notice it was a little bit faster, so I wasn't really sure on how to
adjust for that, right?
How to adjust.
That's with the Nord drum, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
With the
I think we're gonna look into that a little closer. It is tricky because you've got the buffering in and out of the computer, and then you got sync coming out, and it just takes time to fine tune everything.
Right, especially because a lot of it, like normally I would run everything through Ableton in the past, and that was like the mixer, and so now I'm doing the opposite, where it's like all coming through the performance mixer. So yeah, there is a little bit of nuances, but what I think is great is just by doing that adjustment, I found that even sequencing like the BI8 and the DPO, I'm not having any issues. So it could be the Nord drum too. I mean, and also user error, to be fair, I'll definitely say that, but I did notice that if I went to the preset, the drums, and I looked at the gates and I pulled back the groove, and then I was able to get it in the pocket with the Nord drum. So, yeah. So I don't know. But then I decided to not use it, so I didn't really push forward figuring out. But I might just do it just to satisfy my own curiosity later with you. So
Sure, anytime. And you're using MIDI sync over USB?
Yes. Yep.
Okay. Yeah. You have it, but you also have the ES9 in there as well?
Yes. But I'm using the ES9 strictly for audio.
Right.
And one CV trigger. one CV trigger out to a buffered malt, which is then triggering the Jomox, and then just sending like various, to the Zularic repetitor. I have it going to this buffered mold on this, the IntelliGel case here, and yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, Steve has got a setup, and he uses Silent Wave Sync from Cubase through a Motu interface, and I've got an old ES3, and I've done that on occasion, and it's something we can talk about later if you want to go that route. You can. It's a little easier to fine-tune the timing, particularly if you're recording tracks back into Ableton.
Oh, for sure. Okay.
Yeah. But I mean, I'm always with Sync. I'm always like, okay, whatever works. That's kind of the main thing, is to get a setup that works reliably for you. And then tell me a bit about this class. It's coming up in a couple weeks, I think.
Yes. So on the 27th. So yeah, it should be fun. I mean, they just wanted to have me come in and talk about just a little bit about which modules I've chosen to use to play live. And let me come back over so you guys can see me. Yeah, just choosing like which modules I've enjoyed playing live with, and just like that whole journey, I guess, of transitioning, because although I have DJ'd, I'm definitely a musician first, and composer and producer, and DJ, I don't know, like I like to DJ, but I never really consider myself as a DJ, but I like to play live. I play the piano and things like that, so just kind of moving through that journey and how you can get started, I guess, and then where it can take you. So I'll show like a smaller setup and how to build that, and recording, and just fixing that. You like either using track delay and just ways to correct latency as you're recording. Making loops or just recording your jam. But yeah.
That's great.
Yeah,
I'm sorry, Jim. I was addressing the chat. Chris from Learning Modular was interested in the subject, and it sounds like you're already covering that subject in your master class. So that's wonderful.
Nice. Yeah. Thanks, Chris. Thanks for being here. Being awesome.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think that's something that's coming up a lot, because people are, have been using modulars for a while, and now they're starting to have a mix of gear with, standalone gear, computers running DAWs and modular, and then how do you integrate all those, keep everything in sync, and not lose your mind, And the last Vector deep dive, we talked a fair bit about sync and different ways to do sync, and that was just very limited. I didn't try and cover anything about latency compensation in terms of recording back into a DAW. That's a whole nother topic.
Yeah. I mean, it can be done. I mean, I've figured out some different ways to kind of get right into it, so it doesn't take up too much, figuring out all the technical stuff, and then kind of takes you out of your creative flow. So I'll show some of those tips too. But yeah, it should be fun. And I started a Patreon with a friend of mine, Chantal, and that focuses on that too. It's just like more, it focuses on the beginner moving into the intermediate, and how to integrate, whether it's hardware or modular or any other device along with your DAW or your iPad. So yeah.
Excellent. And do you have a link handy for the production class coming up at Point Blank?
Yes. Let me actually get that for you.
You can just drop it into the Zoom chat link, and I'll copy it over to YouTube.
Okay, great. Here you go.
And that's open to pretty much anyone. You just sign up on the fly, and
yep, you just go to that link and then just RSVP, and then what they will do is send you, actually it's a Zoom link, so it'll be private at first, so then you'll be able to join, ask questions, and then they will then post it on YouTube, I think later at another date. So yeah, if you want to be in that, or just to view or even ask questions, definitely RSVP. And I will give you this other link for you too, which is this, if you don't mind, I'll give that. And that's the Patreon, and that's The second thing I was telling you about, which I'm doing, which I'm very excited about, which is having groups, small groups, and just doing beginner sessions and intermediate sessions, and using Ableton and hardware and modular, and walking through various setups and answering people's questions and stuff. So yeah, I think it's gonna be fun. So
excellent. I'm just checking out their website real quick. Okay, wait, that I got a 404 on that one. Let me try that link again. I may have missed.
Which one? The first one or the second one?
There we go. All right. I think I miscopied the link into the chat room. Let me get that back over again.
I'd just be intrigued to know how you pull those massive kicks together, because that was offensively good.
How I do what? I'm sorry, Steve.
That massive kick sound was just offensively good. So.
Well, it's a combination of I have the Jomox kick, which great is because you can design kicks on there and then save it as a preset within that module itself. But then I've also designed my own kicks in Ableton, building racks and things. So I'm blending those two one of my kicks in Ableton and a Jomox kick together. And yeah, because
I know you
like techno, I need to have lots of kicks. So
indeed, and you're sort of layering them beautifully. The other thing that I got of yours recently was that sample pack you did using a bunch of the noise engineering modules, which is really good. Really good content. Maybe as a spin-off from those classes you're running, you could maybe let us have access to some of these amazing sounds in a
of course,
purchasable download, because those were great sounds you made.
Definitely, that's definitely.
I dumped them all in my Rossum, and I've been playing with them a bit. So thank you very much for that opportunity.
Thank you. I'm glad you're enjoying them. Yeah, I dump them even in a drum rack into Ableton, and then either like sequence them and then run them through the effects in like my Eurorack effects, and then record those back into Ableton and chop those as new loops to use it like little percussive little things like in other tracks that I'm making. So yeah, a great way to integrate, playing live and production together is like the goal, like to have that flow.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, look, it's just really nice to hear sort of that level of integration of different gear and everything, and obviously the vectors in there. I've never used Ableton actually, so it's kind of intriguing watching how you guys are doing all this stuff. So.
It's fun seeing your setup because my modular rig involves Ableton pretty heavily, and like your previous version where you ran everything into Ableton is my current iteration. And previously I was using a version similar to what you're doing without a performance mixer. So it's interesting to kind of see like some folks using one approach and other folks using another. And I like the results. Your sync is really nice, and it's a challenge sometimes to get everything to just line up nice and tight. And utilizing the groove feature to just like shift an entire part, it's a great little tool that might be overlooked by some folks because they might just see it as like, oh, I'm only moving one step at a time, but just kind of altering a whole part forward or backwards. That's a great tip.
Yeah, I mean I love doing that. Even in Ableton making music, I don't always stay on the grid. Emotionally, stay on the grid. So.
And you can get like cool, neat phasing tricks and things when you start to kind of misalign things on purpose. So that's cool.
Exactly.
I picked my Zolaric repetitor up a few weeks ago, and I'm loving it. I noticed that you mentioned that previously. What were you using that for in that set? I guess if that's not too specific a question.
Let me look because I forgot.
Yeah, it's a great little module.
I'm clocking. Let's see. Oh, I'm pinging the filter on the Bionic Lester, and then I'm also pinging the delay on the Sarah Jeho. Is that how you say that? Forgive me for mangling this name, but this is an amazing delay, which the DPO is running through. So, and the FM on the MMF filter. So just to kind of add an occasional, just something sporadically moving things around, I guess.
Yeah, I never used it that way. That's interesting. That's really cool.
Yeah.
There was a question too in the chat a while back about the Pioneer effects. Were you using the audio roll delay at some point to kind of get some stutters?
Yeah, there's the here, let me see. So there is the roll, but instead of pushing it forward, I like to pull it back because then it makes that, instead of rolling it forward, as that I don't know how do you describe it? I think if I does that like no, now it's not. Hang on. Now I don't know why all of a sudden it's being weird, but
I think I understand what you mean, how it helps slip the audio kind of pre-beat, post-beat.
yeah, like yeah, just kind of pulls it back. But again, it's something. It has it takes a finesse when you're using it with live hardware because it's like syncing it to like tracks. You know what I mean? But even on the Pioneer mixer, that's like, instead of pulling it forward, I like to dial it back because it gives it like that sound instead of rolling it.
Yeah. So was that the roll or was it the gate effect, or what? Do you remember what effect it was?
Roll, but instead of pushing it forward, just pulling it back.
Got it. Yeah. I like using the DJ mixers as well. There's a lot of extra flexibility that comes with using those synced up effects. It's nice.
Yeah.
Nice work.
So we have a couple questions about LaunchPads in the comment queue, and the general recommendation is to get one of the new Mark III versions. So I've got a Mini around here under some other gear, and so this is the Mark III Mini, and then there's the Mark III Pro and also the LaunchPad X, which Steve was using earlier, and those were all working really well. The older non-RGB ones, excepting like the very first LaunchPad, won't work. It doesn't have class compliant drivers. Like the LaunchPad S and the original Mini, they work okay, but I don't recommend them. And actually the problem isn't the LaunchPads. One problem is they're not in color, and we're using a lot more color on the new mapping. So it becomes harder and harder to get a good user experience on the non-RGB ones. So I've decided to focus on the RGB ones and making use of colors. And then the other problem is more practical, is that those units a lot of them are older, and the USB connections are often physically not very secure. And Steve had a problem with one. A couple of other people have had problems where you bump it just a little bit and you can lose the connection. So and the USB-C ports on all the new ones seem to have a really nice snug connection on them.
Even on the little one, you said, right? Because that's
it's a USB-C as well, which is fantastic. Is my volume better now? I'm so sorry, guys. I've been trying to fix this in the background. I hope you can hear me. Yes, the Mark III
now.
Always small things, isn't it? That you then have to fix. The LP Mark III and the X both have USB-C connectors, and one thing I did is I ordered a little, like an adapter that I just leave permanently plugged into the LaunchPad X. So when I need to disconnect and reconnect the USB cable, I'm not plugging it in. I'm not unplugging it or plugging it back into the LPX or to the Vector. I'm using an adapter and I'm just breaking that connection. So there's no wear and tear on either piece of hardware at either end, which is just, something you don't want to deal with over time. But yeah, the benefit of the LPX, the LaunchPad X, is that it has the velocity sensitivity as well, which is really good fun when you're connecting it to different other synthesizers and things too. But the Mini Mark III works beautifully as well.
Nice.
And so we also have questions, about the STG Sync connectors on the back of the vector, which is, it's going to be hard to get that. Let me switch over to this camera. And that's these two connectors on the back of the vector. And these are basically DIN sync on 3 pins. So you have ground, run, stop, and clock, and it's 24 PPQ and clock. And I recently got some cables for this, and we have some people with this sequencer and the Metron. I'm sorry, I didn't flip my camera over properly. There we go. So that's what those connectors look like on the back of the vector. And I finally have some cables for these. And I'm also going to look into see if we can get some cables made that work directly with Pamela's new workshop. That module has some expansion pins on the back. Those are 5-pin headers. And I think I can make an adapter cable for that. I know Steve was looking into that. He wanted to be able to, that way you can have Pam sending essentially DIN sync to the vector behind the panel and always on, so you don't have to worry about using the run clock jacks. And then also if you wanted to run sync from the vector to the Metron, or I'm not sure what else is out there that has DIN sync available on the back in one way. And I'm just checking comments here. Yeah, we don't send select bus messages. I don't even quite know how that works. I think that's a variation on MIDI.
So yeah, that would be cool, because it would just mean permanently cabled inside the rack rather than across the top. But
yeah, and it keeps the run and clock jacks available. So like there have been requests for that external trigger trick. So if you have a vector and don't have the expander and you want to remote step a sequence from some other module, right now you have to have the expander. And if you know, it's just a few software tweaks to enable that on the run and clock jacks.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. So we'll well, let's see. Looking forward to next month. We're running on the 3rd Saturday of each month. So in February, that will be on the 20th. And we'll figure out a theme and what we want to show then, and diverge as usual into other topics as well, which is always fun. And
have you guys done? Forgive me if I don't know the recording, like recording into as opposed to programming a sequence?
So record modes. We could do that. That's probably a good one. There have been a lot of new record things added in 2.0, so I think that's probably a good thing to do, because we've got step recording, we've got some real-time recording for drums. Step recording for chords is super handy. We don't have real-time for chords yet. And also there are the through modes. So that's handy because you can latch the recording on and set through and use the vector or the expander, some of the CVs there, as basically MIDI to CV conversion.
That basically, the frustrating point for me, at least as a user, was when I was step recording, I would play the notes, but I couldn't hear what they were. So I would go C, G, whatever, and I just believe that they were good notes. But the step through allows you to record your steps, but also hear what you're playing as well as you record it in, which is a lot more friendly. And of course, that went nicely into the real-time step recording too, which was the real-time grid recording, which was heaps of fun.
Yeah.
I can see the benefit of doing the record only when you don't hear the notes is if you know the sequence you want to alter without hearing it played back in a live scenario. Yes. So there's benefits to multiple modes there.
Yeah, that's why I went ahead and put both in, and then of course you know, it's a nice trick. The LaunchPad has a keyboard page, and so if you want to do an impromptu solo and play it on the LaunchPad, you can have it come out of CV or transmitted through MIDI to some other synthesizer.
I think people are pretty excited about learning more about record modes. Tony, Mick, and Jerome have, sorry for just mangled your name, have made some comments. Do you want to flip to the vector view, Jim, and just give us a bit of a basic there, please?
Wait, before you do though, one quick just for myself and maybe for everyone else too. So with all the features with the LaunchPad, it doesn't matter on the size of the new series LaunchPad.
No.
Correct.
The large one or the little, like the little one.
The mini,
The velocity.
Yeah, so there's ours, like Steve was mentioning, there's some features that are on the Pro version that aren't available on the other versions, right?
Right, yes.
Yeah, like velocity, sensitivity, and maybe RGB, color control. What else am I missing on the Pro version versus the Mini?
Well, the Pro has a bunch of sequencing stuff in it, but that's not relevant because when you plug it into the vector, you bypassed all of that anyway. So you summarized it well, Cody. It's really just the RGB function plus the velocity sensitivity. If those things aren't important, then grab the Mini. It's great value and it works really well.
No, the Mini is RGB too as well.
Sorry,
Yeah.
I'm in touch.
So the only thing you're missing if you go with the Mini is velocity.
Yeah.
Correct.
Or the vector.
Correct.
I understand, like in terms of a standalone unit and using it with Ableton or Novation, Bitwig. The big one has all the other features and standalone Mini. But I mean, just in terms of with the vector, the only thing you're missing is velocity with the little one.
Yeah, the LED buttons just don't support it.
Got it.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you get you get a nice clicky button, right? It's not as clicky as say the buttons on the vector, but for a silicone button, it has a nice feel to it. So it's kind of just it's the size, the availability of the velocity, sensitivity, and I'm trying to incorporate that anywhere that it makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So it comes down to personal preference really, and so okay, we'll do just a couple little preview on record modes, and of course, I'm available. Email is generally best for asking questions, but also on the Facebook group or on the 512 forum. And so let's wake the vector back up. I've also plugged in the LaunchPad. Let me adjust the camera here.
Trovarsi, do you think you're going to end up with a LaunchPad, or do you have one already available?
I have one.
Uh-huh.
But, well, ultimately so two things, like ultimately for the class, I'm going to use the push because it's for production school and I think they use the push.
Sure.
And I'm trying to only use Ableton effects and things like that. So if a student there, they can have this, they can use those effects and things like that. But for myself, personally, like when I after the class, I'm probably going to end up using the XL, but I might get a Mini to maybe launch a couple things in Ableton that I need to just launch instead of having the push there. So I can, so that's why. And then, use my other VSTs and things like that. And because ultimately for the class, I want to show, because I also have an ERM for clocking and things like that, but not everybody can go out and spend $500 just to clock something. Not to, so I want to show other workarounds, like by either using the preferences or track delays and other things that you can do without having to drop a lot of money. I mean, you're already spending money on your rec. It's sort of silly, but I mean, you know what I mean? Just a beginner approach. It's like a lot,
It is. Using accessible tools first.
Exactly. That's what I want to show.
Yeah. How's it looking over there, Jim?
I think I'm just about ready to go. Just, I won't show anything with drums this time, just a couple basics on record mode. So let me get system sound running and just a little bit of reverb there. Not too
Are you
much.
going to change the focus? You're going to,
There, whoop.
Oh, not that, sorry. The,
Yeah.
the gallery view or the speaker view, so you'll become the main person on the screen.
There we go. And
Nice. Wonderful.
okay. All right. So I plugged in the LaunchPad, and one comment I saw in the chat line was about having record on for multiple parts. So one of the big changes with the 2.0 and the 1.9 beta is that the record option is when it's on globally. So it stays on until you turn it off. And on the LaunchPad, that shows up as the second button in kind of the right-hand column, what I call scene buttons. So you can turn that on and off there. And record can be on for several different parts, and you can turn these on the LaunchPad, and there's kind of a default mode for step recording. And it can be a little confusing, and it helps to have the LaunchPad running. I could even see adding a preference that record doesn't latch. I did actually have a setting for that originally, and I turned it off. Just wanted to see how it worked out to have it always latched on. And then there are several record modes for a part. Off means off. Step is step mode. And then, so if I have step mode on and I set the source, in this case I'm going to set USB-A, which is where the LaunchPad is plugged in. I can go to the LaunchPad keys page and start programming in the sequence, and you can see the notes on the right hand side OLED. Or, and this is an advantage of having record latch, is I can see them in the sequence. I can turn the steps on in the sequence and start programming in notes. And this is one trick is if you can have the sequence playing, reprogram it on the fly, but the sequence still plays the notes instead of hearing what you're playing on the LaunchPad.
Cool.
Right, so I think particularly if you're someone who doesn't have much keyboard technique and you want to be able to play something like this, this is a way you can have, guaranteed on the grid playing for the sequence, but still be able to enter the notes on the fly. And then the next one up is step plus through, and in this case, you will hear the note as you're programming into the sequence, and if the sequence is playing, what you play on the LaunchPad will temporarily mute the sequence. Or you can clear the sequence, and then if you hold down the shift key and turn the encoder, this little line that's under the step shows you where the step record cursor is. That's where the note will be entered. So I'll play a D, and now we've automatically advanced to the next one. Play an E, or if you don't like that, you can step back with the encoder.
And you have to enable the gates for those on playback, don't you?
Yeah, I stopped the sequence, so I'll turn the gates on, and then start the sequence again.
So when you're in step mode, and the sequencer isn't running, you use encoder 9 to increment through to the, if you don't want to have it on every note, you'd use encoder 9 to scroll through to the one you want to hear the note on.
Yeah, and this is...
Otherwise Sorry, you go.
Go ahead, yeah.
Yeah, so otherwise you could do what I did, which is just set up a drum part with like a hi-hat for your click track, and just like it's like playing pool. You name which pocket you're going to get it in before you hit the note, and you just get really good at inserting the notes on the fly. But yeah, it's good fun once you do.
Jim, one of the questions in the chat is, what's the record mode that's activated when you activate record via the LaunchPad?
Okay, so if there's a mode set for the part, it's that mode on and off. So I can go off and it'll go back to step plus through, which was the one it was set before. On a part,
unless you change it to something else, it's going to default to the standard version.
Well, it's just going to go to for step mode.
Okay, there you go.
Yeah. So part 2 didn't have anything set. It's going to go to step automatically. And let's say I want it to be through. If I turn it off and turn it back on again, it'll remember that it was through before.
Right.
Perfect.
That's cool. Someone else earlier, and I'm sorry I didn't catch the name, was asking about a tuning mode. And I believe what they might have been asking for is a way to send the same note out to whichever active parts, so you could just tune your VCOs. I may have misinterpreted that, but
I think you're correct there. Like all parts sending C at the same time via a hotkey or something.
Yeah, is that? Yeah, I mean, it was just
there's nothing specific for that. That's actually a pretty reasonable feature request. I can think of a couple ways to do it. What I usually do is I will start with let's say I'm on part 1. I'm going to set the length to 1 and turn the gate all the way on. And that'll hold that note. And that's only out of the CV1.
Is it easy to copy this preset to the other parts?
Actually, what I would do, but it messes up the routing, so I'm not sure whether to recommend it or not. But there's a hidden trick we use. I mean, you can manually go in. Actually, probably it is better to go in manually and say part 2 is 1. Set all your pitches to part 1.
Ah, okay. That'd be pretty fast.
Okay, and now all the pitch CVs will output the same thing as the first one. And then what I usually do for tuning also is I've got a chord prologue under here, underneath this shelf, and I'll play a note on that and tune everybody to that note. And it's just whichever note, the key that I'm using for the key for that piece.
Now, a follow-up question to this, maybe another method via the LaunchPad. Could you use record through mode and quick select all parts and just hold one key on the LaunchPad?
Yeah, so I set 1, 2, 3. Make sure to set the source.
This would be easier for me, I believe, and possibly for other folks with LaunchPad, because then you could check if everything's tracking across multiple octaves easier.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's through mode, which also if you have, we'll turn off some of these notes. Just have a few notes playing. Go back and set my length back to 8.
And couldn't you also use the keyboard built into the vector if you don't have a LaunchPad?
Yes. So that's VKBD. But it's not holding right. I think that's something I either fixed or I need to fix.
It may have been playing the run sequence. The key.
Yeah,
but
that's a tricky thing is handling the conflict between what you're playing here and what's coming out of the sequence when it's the same notes.
But basically, the way it is now, you can just hit the white or gray keys and pick your note and tune everything to that pretty easily. So you don't need a LaunchPad. That's great.
Yeah.
Multiple ways to get the job done.
Yeah, and then when you're done, you turn record off, and it's off for everybody.
And you could have done that. Yes, so you can do record off or on the vector. You can also do it in row 2 on the LaunchPad. So you've got that lit up there and it's showing interactive and not.
So depending on the method you desire the most, just use the record feature or use the route all parts from the one part you're tuning to. And Trovarsi, were you trying to jump in there? Sorry.
Yeah, sorry. I have a question with the keyboard. So, I mean, I understand like transposing and you can use the keyboard to transpose, but are you able to just use the keyboard just to play?
Yes. If you set
So
reset record mode on.
Uh-huh.
Set it to through and VKBD. It only works when you're on the record page.
Okay, so you have to be on the record page and then you can play.
Yeah. So now you can
like freestyle it is basically.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
And I have actually done that in a performance. NobCon last year before. Yeah, it was last year before last year now.
And something else that's cool while we're just kind of chatting about this is if you have a preset for a part and you want to variate the part pretty easily, you can just copy that preset over to a new spot and utilize the transpose with the keyboard and just transpose the whole part up or down and kind of copy and paste your parts utilizing the global transpose feature and get variations pretty quickly, I find. If you have a sequence and you just want to alter your progression by a step or by an octave, using that keyboard's a quick way to get in there and do that.
Yeah. I mean, you can do that directly on the sequence control page. So if I have this pattern running,
I've had a lot of fun doing that, just like jumping like third, fifth, seventh, ninth, and
Yeah.
like,
Good fun, especially when you've got a big long delay session happening and it just all starts to harmonize or not.
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, that helps me build tracks pretty quickly, like using the presets and scenes with the parts. If I get a good jam going, it's just like bam, quick variation, A part, B part, C part, done.
So yeah, you can do this from record mode as well. So I've got running from transpose from the LaunchPad. And then we also have, there's through mode again, real-time grid, which is tricky at this tempo, so I'm going to slow it down. That's one thing about real-time is it's timing sensitive. I'm going to clear out the pattern, and I'm going to bump this up to 16 steps. Oh, and I have a transposition issue. I need to make that back to 0. So I'm not sure I'm getting a transposition problem, but I'll certainly figure that out. But the idea is that you can play something on the keyboard.
I noticed that intermittently and I couldn't work it out, but it sort of came good. So
Yep. No, that's actually the first time I've run into that particular thing. I think it has to do when using the LaunchPad.
It might, is it record mode and transpose together are being altered?
Well, I'll find out.
Yeah.
Easier to do that offline.
Sure.
And then real-time grid is also available for drums. I don't have drums set up on this system. I know Steve uses that a lot. I've used it on one of my other systems. So that's record modes super briefly.
Yeah, because with the next Vector deep dive, we're going to dive into all of the record features, and we can come up with some of the variations based on conversations we see in the forum over the next couple of weeks to focus on outside of the things that we'll already plan to focus on. There's a lot of good questions going on in the chat. Can you record longer steps holding a note?
Yes, you can do that. Yeah.
That one's pretty easy to address. Mod inputs or triggers to click the evolve or generate functions.
Yeah, that's a long-standing request is a modulation source, and so that would show up on the external CVNs, and for sources you'd be able to pick a trigger input, and then you have a different set of targets probably. So it'd be like trigger input would say be reset or T1 through something on the expander, and then you'd be able to set the target as, say, next preset, previous preset, random preset. That's kind of the obvious way to put that in. But it's a relatively open-ended change, so I wanted to make sure I got a handle on the scope control on that one before I dive into it.
Yeah, and remind us, Jim, the folks who have all the wonderful suggestions that we've either touched on today or we'll touch on the next deep dive, where should they be sending those suggestions to so that they don't get lost in translation?
So there's a feature request section on forum.512.net. That's always a good place to put them. I don't respond to every one because it's, I'm never quite sure when I'll be able to get things in, but I do go through it regularly and look at things. Also, email is always good. Send email to info@512.com. I keep a private list with my own features and kind of sort things out in terms of where the priorities are. And, the main goal right now is to get 2.0 locked down, get these last few bugaboos taken care of, and get that out as soon as we can. And also, as kind of part of this updated video series, I'm hoping to do some tutorial videos and just walk through these same sorts of examples and try and keep it as focused on, very task-oriented, very specific short videos to make it easy to, like, say, go in, okay, well, show me the record modes, or go in and let's look at presets and playlists. So very handy for people that are like haven't used it in a while and are like, okay, how do I do this? And where's the manual? Oh, I can go to YouTube and just watch a 5-minute video.
Right. Jeroen had a question about real-time recording and so on. So it was specifically about real-time grid. I think what he's asking is could you record to multiple parts at the same time doing that? So if you had record on enabled to real-time grid, does it just record to the part you've got active at that particular point, or would it record to multiple parts? And I must admit, I've never tried that.
Well, I mean, that's kind of the interesting Pandora's box of global record is you can have record on for all 8 parts in the same mode or in different modes. And it offers some interesting possibilities and also, potentially some confusion. And but you could have real-time grid open for 2 different parts or 3 different parts and record to them simultaneously.
Right.
The Steve's got to think about that.
Do with that, yeah.
I'm like, let me add that to my notes.
Yeah.
That's my afternoon.
Yeah. I mean, something that I'd like to add later on that hasn't really come up yet on the feature request is to have keyboard zones. So if you've got a 4 or 5 octave keyboard, you'd be able to define different zones, and then in the record page, for the source, you'd be able to pick one of the zones. So that would make it a little more realistic to have record mode on in multiple parts at once. So you could have.
I would love this. I would love this feature.
So you could have, an octave or 2 for transpose on, your bass and your pads. Another one open that's always through on some sort of lead line. So anytime you want, you can just reach over and play a lead line and have that come through. Or if you've got, if you've got a, the classic 4x4 Akai style pad setup, that could always be on for recording on top of your drum patterns. And that's surprisingly straightforward to add, is having the zones like that. So it'll be interesting once I can get it running.
2.1, 2.3, something like that.
Yeah. Definitely we're not going to jump to 3.0, right? So once 2.0 is out, there'll be a small collection of things, and that'll be 2.1, and then we'll kind of reevaluate every few weeks going forward.
I really like that you're just very hands-on and everything is evolving. Aside from the sequencer is amazing, but the fact that you're always adding improvements and listening to all your patrons.
Yeah. No, I mean that's why I really appreciate you coming on board, and all the discussions we've had offline is get that feedback and and really kind of tweak out the vector and polish it and make sure that it's really fulfilling its potential in terms of a music creation device and for performing, and some of that's the critical stuff that's not particularly exciting, like synchronization, as critical as it is. It's like you just want it to work. And then things like the record modes are a more creative thing. It's like, okay, how can we make these interesting, and and then get the feedback and say, okay, yeah, so maybe we need a preference so only one part can record at once, so that when one is on, another automatically toggles off. That's those little usability things. It just takes time to get feedback and make a decision about what's going to work best for everybody. But I mean, there's
I was going to ask if it makes sense to consider like a preset location on a LaunchPad page where you can store your MIDI map on a keyboard under a LaunchPad button, and then you can have mode 1, mode 2, mode 3, mode 4. And if there's a blank page or a way to do that, maybe that would help someone like me if that's a feasible option.
Well, you get 4 octaves on the LaunchPad keyboard we have now, and that's that's, you know, a pretty simplistic layout, right? We've got, you know, I know a lot of people aren't crazy about this layout, but it's pretty simple to understand. You still have 4 octaves, so, and we could do zones here as well as anywhere else. And then we got several requests for custom layouts. And you know, if we only showed, say, 8 notes per octave, you could have, you know, 4 or 5 octaves and still have a row or two that could be, say, drum notes, right? So there's some interesting possibilities there in terms of doing hybrid layouts.
Well, or my follow-up to that is, if you stored that information in your project and changed it for a different project, is that project-specific data?
That's a good question. That's one of the things I hadn't figured out yet, is where is that stored? Is that more of a system-wide thing or a project thing? That's kind of a frequent conflict with preferences, you know. And something that came out in email, a couple different threads lately, is you know, option to have a template project, because right now all your routings are stored per project. So when you start a new project, if you have a complex routing system, you have to basically rebuild it, or you do a save as on a project where it's already set up.
I have to use save as, hands down,
yeah.
or I'm lost without it, honestly.
Yeah, I'm with you. Same thing.
Yeah. So, you know, and I think the thing to do is just to make it so that, you know, if you save a project with the template name, right, or you some way you can designate that product as a template, then when you create a new project, it'll load that template. Or if you load the template directly and you go to save, it will automatically save it to a new name, you know, or force you to rename it.
Yeah, I like that. I mean, that's the only way I can do it. So if there's another way, it doesn't work for me already.
Yeah. For now, just save as is the way.
Yeah.
So
I'm pretty deep into some technical stuff there. I've got just a more general question, if it's all right for Shanda.
Sure.
So you got the vector a little while back, and you've obviously been pretty active with it. What were you using prior to that, and what positives and negatives have you found sort of with that transition, you know, moving to the sequencer in the rack? What were you doing before that, and so
on? Let's see. Well, before, I've used the Metron, which I still have in my other case, and I still use that. I've sequenced with Electron gear, like the various pieces, the BeatStep Pro, the KeyStep. I think I've used almost every sequencer. I've used a lot of sequencers, but I switched into this one. My main sequencer before was the Metron for Eurorack stuff, and I still love it. Like, I love
a lot of people use that pair too. I know Brian here does, and I think a couple other guys do too. But Brian's a big advocate of that pair, I believe.
Yeah, the one thing that I like making melodies too, and that was what really drew me with the vector, is that I like to see what notes. And when you're using the Metron, which is great, but you have you have to turn and then you'd see the note. And I like to see at least a few notes to kind of get an idea of how many, you know, I want to go up a third or a fourth, or where I'm going with my sequence. I'm a very visual person, so the vector, the way it's laid out, works really well for the way I work. And then just like all these extra capabilities, like the MIDI, and like, I don't know, like I've been taking notes even in this session today. Just like, there's just so much more that you can do with this sequencer that I haven't found in other sequencers. I have a lot of their sequencers, but to get all these features, it's just, you know, it's really hard to find. And
Yeah, I think it's a great observation. And I came to Vector when it was just a monophonic part sequences, like way back. And I'd used a lot of the Electron gear prior to that, and they have excellent sequencing options in them, but it's pretty much MIDI-based stuff. And if you're in that world, that's okay. But obviously with the CV capabilities and the visual and touch aspect of this device, that's kind of what got me across.
Yeah. I mean, and like, I do like enjoy, like, the fills is something I've, you know, Jim, you and I talk about the fills. And then, you know, learning today how you kind of do patching to get to that, to make fills. that was like the one thing I think for me that was, I mean, I don't do a ton of fills, but I like those fills on the Metron, the way they kind of have variations. And so I don't know, I feel like now I'm gonna probably tear apart some of the and figure out.
You have that touchpad for CV control, right? So
Yes,
you can map that into a mod input and
like another FSU and then do that. And what I didn't catch, I know we spoke about it before, but I did make a note, which was really important, is that you used only one mod for both. When you were creating your fill, it was both settings were on just the one mod out. Okay.
There's another thing that I wanted to demonstrate that I didn't get to, but I think you'll enjoy it. I won't go into it deeply, but just imagine you had a drum pattern that was 16 steps, right? You set your start as 1 and the length is 16. You could also use your length to expand out past 16 so that it plays more stuff after that. But you could also have your length set as 8, but then a chance operator on 1 that just goes straight to, say, step 9 or step 10.
Ooh.
Right. And then you could use the CV controller as your probability modifier, and you just max it. And then when you do that, it's going to force your pattern to just jump to that next point, be 9 or 10 or whatever, and play that instead.
Ooh.
I didn't get a chance to demo that, but you can sort of, and I like that hands-on control. I played guitar for a bunch of years. I like being able to touch things and make them do things. But yeah, that's fun.
That's a great tip.
I'll try it.
Yeah, I need to try that as well. That's wonderful. I'm gonna listen back to the recording and exercise that, because that's a super huge influence, I think, to be able to jump to step 9, 10, 11 and play for so many steps before going back to the 1. That's a great way to get a feel.
You have to adjust your lengths and things too. It's a little bit trickier, but
sure.
Yeah, I'm gonna
do some math.
Demonstrate it. Yeah.
I think we'll have to have Steve demo for this proper next time around.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Utilizing a record mode to get there.
Hey, I'll throw polyrhythms in as well.
Perfect.
Okay. All right.
I do have one more question. So with the mod, is there a way to have like a global setting? Like, I don't know if this is possible now that I'm saying it out loud. But,
no. It's always good to ask.
When I think of a fill, I mean, it's not just about the drum fills, right? I mean, yes, it is about the drum fills, but when you listen to, for example, since I brought up the Metron, when you're listening to that, it stutters the entire pattern. So that's where the whole sequencer as a whole. It's not just. So I don't know if there's a way to have like a global. So that way you don't have to go to each part and like modulate each part. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You have to go into all your drum part, modulate, set it. Is there a way to kind of just maybe change?
Well, there's this thing called the dashboard, which is a good way to edit several parts at once. So if you're on the part, you hit the part button.
Okay. Let me write this.
And then you hit next. And now you're in the dashboard, which gives you one parameter across all 8 parts, and the parameter name is in the top left. So this time it's start, which is where the sequence starts, but length would be the one that corresponds to what Steve was doing earlier. So right now they're all 8 steps, and I mean it's not as immediate as grabbing one knob or one button, but you can start messing with the lengths of things, and this can be kind of a performance technique. And then when you're ready, you can either get out of it by dialing it back, or you could have a LaunchPad, and this is one of the reasons LaunchPad is so handy, is you can jump out of that scene, right? So you could have a scene that you're kind of reserved for, the whole FSU thing, right? I'm going to mess with all these patterns. You can go into the dashboard, and you got basically it's all the same parameters that are in sequence control. This page here: start, length, direction, reset, and rate mode. Octave transposition. These are all useful to modify across your different patterns as a live technique. And and kind of one of the notes I had on my own is like, okay, now how do we get out of this, right? But using the presets and scenes is a good way to get out of that quickly.
Ah, okay. Well, that maybe answers what question I was going to bring up is like, a way to interface with these controls. I think one of the features that, I've kind of requested off and on is being able to grab sections of the sequence and hold them for a few steps and then let go and it continues to play.
Right, right.
And this might be a way to get that feature if like I have a section that I want to create a repeat of, then I can program those repeats by adjusting the step lengths for each of the parts and store that as a new scene. So
how about this? Sorry, Cody. How about this? Say your pattern's 16 steps, right? You put a jump command on step 16 to jump back to 13, right? So 13, 14, 15, 16, 4 steps. And you modify the probability that that jump will operate via your external control. So that when you twist the dial, it says chance operator, and I'm looking at it on the screen, target probability. See, it's a source external, target probability, amount 100. And I haven't tried this, so I'm just thinking. If you dialed your CV control out, it should then say, yes, chance will be enabled, and the chance just happens to be a jump. And so whenever you're modifying that CV, it would jump you back. Does that make sense, Jim?
Yeah, sort of.
And then another copy.
I mean, what I think is we should come up with a general set of ideas for fills and fill options. I know people want a dedicated fill mode. I'm not quite sure what that looks like yet, but there are certainly plenty of options for taking your presets and messing with them, and then the main thing is just knowing how you're going to get back out of it.
If there was a way to temporarily hold.
What I was just thinking. Sorry if I mangle your name. But I'll just Tokay.
Cody.
No, she's talking about in the chat. There's a Tokay fleave home.
Yes, and that's what I was thinking too.
I think we're collectively thinking the same thing together. It's wonderful.
Okay, yeah, I can see that. Shift encoder 9 to edit all of them. Yeah.
Yeah.
Or pull it back maybe to 3 steps, and then you pull it right back.
If there's similar, the effect that I'm describing, like utilizing the strip on the Pioneer DJM mixer, to be able to hold 4 beats and let go and it just goes back. If there's a button on the LaunchPad that we could allocate to a value for the step length, or the step start or step end, and maybe there's 8 values that the LaunchPad has 8 grids, and you could pick any of those 8 values to hit all the parts. That might be how I could see that integrating with the dashboard as a page on the LaunchPad, perhaps.
Oh yeah, that's a great idea.
Yeah, I mean that gives having a LaunchPad page offers some interesting options because you can map out 32 steps or even 64 steps of a sequence.
Yes.
And, automatically pick the steps with your fingers and hold those and then let go.
Yeah, we're not trying to reinvent the wheel here either. It's just accessing the dashboard with the buttons on the LaunchPad really would, probably free up a lot of the features that we're asking for.
Okay. Yeah, lots of good ideas. So I'll start up a thread on the forum about that, and people can jump in. I'll go ahead and do that now.
Yeah, so shift encoder 9 feature for dashboard and LaunchPad page, perhaps. This has all been wonderful.
I was just trying that thing I was ranting about a minute ago, and I haven't got it working yet, but I will, I reckon.
The sequence.
Yeah, the dashboard is an exciting bit of tools that I think I personally overlook often. There's a lot to access there, and it's like as soon as I feel like maybe I'm at a point with my sequence where it's like, all right, what next? I mean, the dashboard it seems like an obvious go-to to just kind of mangle and rework what I'm working on and create a new preset and scene, and then bam, there's that writer's block is moved past immediately. That's great. I need to incorporate it more.
I know, I wrote it down myself.
Yeah, yeah. The dashboard and the subsequence and the modulation inputs, I feel like, are the things I personally overlook the most. I'm going to dive into that more.
Yeah,
Okay.
this is great.
Yeah, yeah. So thanks everybody for coming. It's been great. You know, I was kind of hoping we'd wander off into the weeds a bit, and we did. And that's always fun. You know, thanks everybody checking in on YouTube. We had a pretty good turnout, lots of good questions, and you know, I made a thread on the 512 forum so people can make comments on you know, things we can add for the dashboard. You know, anything, any ideas in terms of new fill modes we can exchange, we can work on. Special thanks to Trovarsi for hanging out with us today. You know, looking forward to your class coming up in a couple weeks. And, you know, anybody who's here doesn't know about the Facebook group. It's a very active group, 512 vector sequencer users. Steve started it up a couple years ago. It's been a great place for exchanging ideas and information. And, you know, and so great. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Cody and Steve.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's a wonderful time.
Keeping me on track.
Thank you.
And so thanks, everybody, again for showing up. We're hoping to keep this up every month. And we'll see you online in the meanwhile. Take care.
Awesome.
Excellent.